the H.A.T.A.E Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to season 2 of the H.A.T.A.E Podcast with me, Benjamin Madel. Today, I'm with Barber and Innovator, Henry Teribes. How are you, Henry?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. We're not going to stop what we did in the first series. We're going to carry on and get straight into it. So, how did you get into the hair industry, Henry?
So I became a barber. Well, actually, even before I became a barber, right? A little bit of background information. So it all started when I went to college when I was 18. I went to college in a city that was not so diverse, and given a lack of options for ethnic barbers or barbers who can operate on ethnic hair, I decided to go to Walmart to buy some clippers and start cutting my own hair. And then pretty much did that all of college, or let me just say, did that for like my freshman year, and then by my sophomore year, people started noticing that like my haircuts were pretty decent, and then I started cutting other people, and I could vividly remember cutting people in the bathroom of the dorms, and it just kind of snowballed into me going to get more professional clippers. And by the time I graduated, I already knew what I wanted to do, so I just went straight to barber school after getting my degree.
Fabulous. What did you get your degree in, Henry?
So I got a bachelor's in business, so marketing specifically. Yep.
Okay, great. And was that sort of an easy decision to make after going through sort of the college system and whatnot, and then deciding, you know what,
Uh,
I think I'm going to give all that up after working, all those years to get your degree
yeah.
and whatnot, and then become a barber?
It was not an easy decision because obviously when you're in business school, I think it's like very, praised to have a job lined up before you even graduate. That's like the cool thing. It's like, okay, well, I already have a job lined up, right? So for me, graduating, I didn't have the luxury of having like an offer before I graduated. So I think that really gave me time to be able to just think about what I wanted moving forward. So moving back home was kind of like a sobering moment for me because it's like, okay, I just completed college. I don't have a job. Like, what are you going to do? So I kind of just started reading books. I did a lot of traveling. I just kind of used that downtime to kind of, I guess, go on like a self-discovery quest. And I think that's when it all just hit me, where I remember thinking to myself, literally, I'm 22 years old then. And I remember thinking to myself, your degree doesn't have an expiration date. Just go to barber school now. And eventually, if you want to use your degree and enter the corporate world later on, you can always do that. So that was kind of like my thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you move back to where you were from originally then to go and do your barber course, or did you stay where you were at university?
So I moved. So essentially, I'm from the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So I went to a satellite school, University of Minnesota Satellite School, which is 2 hours north, smaller city. So I moved back to the city after graduating, and yeah, and that's where I essentially began my barbering career.
Yeah, with that, did you sort of go sort of straight into working in the shop as along with cosmetology school as well, or did you sort of do school separately and then go into a shop?
Oh, good question. I do remember when I was in college, there was a summer I came home to work part-time at a friend's mom's salon. And I would pretty much just, call a few friends to come get a haircut. And it wasn't anything structured per se. It was just more me just getting a professional environment and, and cutting my friend's hair essentially. And then um, all through barber school, I did not cut hair in a barber shop. I held two jobs while in barber school. One of them was working selling shoes at JCPenney, and the other was working at a group home, working overnights. So that was how I was able to pay for barber school.
Absolutely. And was that a sort of a conscious choice as well? Did you ever go into ladies' hairdressing as well? Like you say, that experience working in your friend's mum's
Yeah.
place, or and then sort of going in deciding just to go to the barbering later on? Or was the
No, I
barbering
pretty
just this what
much
we're doing?
just I pretty much just stuck to what I knew, which was barbering. So it pretty much served as like a complimentary services to the services for women the salon was already offering. And a lot of times the women would bring their husbands, boyfriends, brothers, nephews, whatever it is, to me to cut their hair. So that's kind of how it went.
So it all flowed quite nicely into that. And then
Yes.
after you sort of finished there, your barber school and whatnot, did you go sort of self-employed straight away? Did you go into a shop? Did you work at a shop for a long time or?
Yeah, so my journey as a barber has been a little bit unconventional because after barber school, I actually then entered the workforce as I was a inside sales trainee for a company called Ferguson,
Okay.
and they pretty much sold HVAC equipment. So I did sales for them for a year, I believe it was, and they actually shipped me over to they sent me over to Charlotte, North Carolina for a sales training program. So I was there for 6 months. At this time, I'm already a licensed barber, right? So I cut hair at a barber shop over in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then after this training program concluded, I moved back to Minnesota, continued working for the company. And then after work, I would go work in a barber shop and on the weekends. So I did that for another maybe 8 months. And then essentially, I just had enough of the corporate world. I was like, I'm miserable. I hate waking up at 5 a.m. to come do something I absolutely hate. And I'm just happier at the barbershop than in the office. So
Yeah, so it was quite unconventional, really, in that term, isn't it?
yeah,
Really, it's like you say, you'd done your barber school, you decided that was the direction you wanted to go, and then I suppose you were still using your business degree there, working in the sort of the sales for the HVAC company, but then
yes.
working in the barber on the side. Do you find that's quite a common route, or is it sort of quite uncommon? It seems to me.
You know, now it is. Now it's very common to see barbers who have college degrees. It's very common to see because the thing about it, Ben, is college is such a great starting point for any barber because you have all these college kids at your disposal to essentially practice on. And, they're looking for haircuts. They're looking, obviously they're looking for a budget barber because they don't have, 40, 50, $60 to spend on a haircut. So it's just the perfect place to start for a barber because you can really get some experience. And a lot of barbers these days, especially now with barbering, just with how the industry has exploded over the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. It's not very uncommon to see people choose barbering, even with a degree. But to answer your question, in 2014, when I did it, it was not common. It was, people thought I was insane. It was very unconventional. And, I had to do a lot of explaining to people like, hey, I just really love cutting hair. It's my dream. And I know it might not make sense now, but it'll make sense later.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. It's quite an interesting way to go about it. It's like you said, to work in the two jobs, doing that as well. And I also think,
Hmm.
like you say, is with this sort of increase there in people with degrees going into the hair industry, I think it's perhaps they're looking at it much like you've just said, is that they don't think they can deal with this 9 to 5 for the next 30, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, well, they always wanted to be a hairdresser, or they wanted to be a barber, but never quite thought they were able to as such,
Exactly.
the sort of
Yeah.
societal pressures and whatnot else that will sort of
Yes.
mold that and change your sort of ideas on what direction you want to go. So
Yes, exactly.
when you went full time, were you working independently then, or were you working for somebody else in a shop?
So when I went full time, if you remember, I would go to the barbershop after leaving the office, right?
Yeah,
So I essentially transitioned into full time at that barbershop that I was already working part time at. The barber shop owner was incredibly graceful and just patient with me as I figured it out, right? So essentially, when I figured out that this is what I want to do, I want to be full time, I'm all in. He kept my chair and allowed me to transition into full time. And, I'll be forever grateful to him for giving me that opportunity to start at his barbershop as a part time barber who had a full time job in the corporate world.
yeah, that's good. It's nice when you can find people like that, a sort of understanding of your situation and what you want
Hmm.
to do. And well, as you say, it paid off in the end because you got yourself in there full time, didn't he? In the end,
Absolutely.
Was that
Absolutely.
was it a big shop or a small shop, a chain of shops, an independent, or what? How did the sort of the shop look?
So it's a big shop but it's owned by one individual. He is a pretty prominent barber in Minnesota, well known, well respected, and I think he opened up the barbershop while I was in barber school, and the barbershop just happened to be down the street from the barber school, right?
Yeah,
So I'm in barber school, and I kept hearing about this barbershop. I read about it in the newspaper. I think they even made it on the news, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, like this barbershop is, they're really, making some noise. So, but I think what really attracted me to their barbershop was just the quality of their work, right? Like just looking at the amount of details that went into their haircuts. I just wanted to go over there and figure out, okay, I need to see what you guys are doing over here because everybody's haircuts looks a certain way and you guys' looks almost perfect. So I was like, I need to go over there to see what they're doing, learn from them, and hopefully be able to grow my career. So honestly, when I look back in hindsight, I'm very thankful for the opportunity he gave me, and I'm glad that I made that decision because there was a lot of different shops I could have went to, a lot of different options, but I'm glad that I made that decision to go to that shop because it gave me an excellent start to my career.
It's really important, isn't it? Is when you're just starting out to get a good grounding and be around people who do it very well. If you sort of train to the level that you're at, type of thing. If you're surrounded by good people, you're going to be good. As long as you're paying attention and doing what you should be doing, you're gonna be good. And unfortunately, it goes the other way as well. If you're sort of hanging around people who aren't quite so good, don't quite do things the right way, unfortunately, that rubs off as well. So, how long did you stay at that shop for?
So I was at that shop for 2 years, maybe a little bit over 2 years, I believe. But you have to remember, my first year there, I was still part time,
Yeah.
right? So I decided to go full time. I started February 2016, quit my job December 2016, and decided to go full time January 2017. So then I was there for another maybe year, a year and a half as a full time barber. So yeah, summer 2018 is when I left.
And then what was your movements after that?
So that was when I officially went independent, went into my own salon suite, June 2018, I believe it was. And at the time, salon suites were not popular in the barbering industry. It already was in the cosmetology industry. A
Yeah.
lot of stylists, these suites were filled up with stylists, but it was still a new concept in the barbering industry. And I remember just being super scared and just a little bit apprehensive. And, I just wanted to see if, my clients would follow me. I didn't know if like, they would be loyal to the barbershop or if they would be loyal to me. So I kind of was a little bit hesitant, but I made the move and it ended up working out. And I think about 3 months after being in the suites, I signed a lease to my barbershop and I started building that out.
Okay, so you weren't in the suite for very long then. You were, you know, straight out and back into building the shop up.
I, I think I was there for like 6 or 7 months. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
quite a quick going in. So you obviously found that your clients came over as well, and
Yeah.
everyone was pretty loyal to yourself there. It's
Yeah.
quite interesting to hear that in the way that the suites work over here. I'm here in the States now, but obviously wasn't before. It
Yeah.
The way the suites work, 'cause it's now a model that's sort of catching on elsewhere, rent a chair, rent a space type salons in the UK, which is a similar sort of idea. But yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the barbering it wasn't quite so common. It was much more shop based. So it's quite brave and in order to go and do that then.
Yeah. I mean, even today, if you go in your average suite, I'm willing to bet you'll see more stylists than you'll see barbers,
Yeah.
right? Barbering is a very like old school, traditional, stay true to the core values of like barbering with the barbering pole and a barbershop and just the general the conversations, the culture of the barbershop. So a lot of barbers still want to stay true to that. But a lot of barbers are also, evolving and just getting with the times, which is creating a more intimate, private setting for their clients, being able to set their prices, being able to operate on their own schedule, being able to build out their brand. And a lot of barbers, including me, use it kind of like as a way to transition from the barbershop to building out their own barbershop, right? So that's what I did. I pretty much used it as a litmus test for the bigger barbershop, right? Because I knew if I can prove to myself that these clients are loyal to me and my personal brand, then opening up a barbershop is not going to be a problem.
How did you find that transition from going from working in the salon, working for someone, then going into obviously being self-employed, independent, working in the salon suite, to then going into the barber shop? Did you find that's quite a sort of obviously the speed you moved that was quite quickly from working
Yeah.
for someone into a full shop of your own? How did you find that? Was there challenges along the way?
I mean, yeah, there's always challenges along the way, but to give credit to that owner that I worked for, I was still an independent contractor in his barbershop,
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah,
Because it was booth rental. So he allowed us, like, he gave us the full freedom and autonomy to work as independent contractors, building our own brands, even within his shop, right? Now, obviously, it was still his barbershop, so there were still certain rules that we had to follow. But for the most part, we were able to do whatever we wanted to do to
Oh,
build our
okay.
brand, whether it's, creating content, whether it was, printing our own branded t-shirts, hoodies, capes. He gave us that freedom to be able to do that. So all I had to do was move that from my station, right, to a suite. And then when the suites worked out, all I had to do was move that from the suite to the barbershop. Now, that was probably a harder transition, was going from the suite to the barbershop, because with the barbershop, of course, you got to sign the lease, you got to do a build out, and it requires a decent amount of capital to get that started, just to get to like day one of the barbershop. And, ran into issues with, contractors and pulling licenses and permits and stuff like that. But I would say going from the shop to the suite was, I think it was just more a mental roadblock. But as far as the actual transition, wasn't too difficult. Now going from the suite to the barbershop, I had a lot of challenges for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, like you say there with permitting and
Oh,
all the red tape that you have to cut through.
it was tough.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it was. And is it with that? Did you get on staff? Did you? Did you rent other chairs out in once you opened the shop up?
So when I opened up the barbershop, and this is one of the many challenges I faced when I opened a barbershop, is I actually ended up opening up the barbershop by myself, right? No barbers, no stylists. I remember my first day. I'm in this big 1,500 square foot shop with 5 chairs, and I'm just the only barber there. And I remember specifically one of my clients literally asked me and was like, "Bro, maybe you should have waited to get barbers before you opened up a barbershop." And there was that moment of like self doubt, like, maybe he is right. Maybe I should have solidified some barbers or gotten some commitments from potential barbers to work with me before I signed the lease. But I was already in, the lease was already signed, I was already committed. So I already did the math, and I knew that just me working at the shop would be able to cover the rent
Yeah,
or the expenses, and I would still be able to be profitable. Even if that wasn't ideal, I knew that as long as I stayed healthy and I was able to cut hair, that I would be able to cover my expenses. And that was what mattered to me.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
eventually, the first barber walked in, the second barber walked in. And, 6 years later, I think we have 11 or 12
Yeah.
barbers in there.
It's
So
it's a way to do it. I mean, there's a lot to be said for running a business like that. Is knowing that you can afford to run it if you're the only one.
yes,
If you're the only one there,
yeah,
if it all goes terribly wrong tomorrow, you'll be okay.
exactly.
And there's a lot of people who aren't in that position. Most salon businesses aren't in that position. They're reliant on having everyone there, which is fine depending on how you want to run your business. But in my opinion, that's the sensible way to run the business. If I can run it
Yeah,
on my own, we'll be all right. Everyone
yeah.
else is just the gloss on top.
For sure. And that's why I love the barbershop industry, is because, or at least the way I ran it, is because it was such low overhead, right? Like I didn't have to worry about spending money on a bunch of expensive products and equipment. As long as I had my station and my chairs in there, I could just pull out my clippers and make money.
Yeah,
And I think that knowing that just a week worth of work or a week worth of haircuts would be able to cover my expenses, I think that was what gave me even more full confidence to move forward.
did you find that your business degree helped you out with that side of things? When you were opening the shop and planning on how to run things.
I mean, definitely, I
Yeah,
think that what business school did for me was just kind of gets you in that entrepreneurial mindset. And I mean, you when you're on the field, you realize quickly that a lot of business actually is common sense. um, so I think that a lot of the stuff we learned in business school, of course, was theoretical, and of course, it was more grooming us to work corporate. But I mean, just the simple stuff like, okay, how much are my expenses? How much am I forecasting in revenue for a month? And just starting there, it's pretty simple P&L statement.
yeah,
And knowing that, okay, like I said, just a week of work, and I'll be able to cover my expenses for the month, and the remaining 3 weeks will be profit, and that's just me.
yeah,
So knowing that gave me the full confidence to move forward. And another thing, business school, and this is really important. The one thing business school taught me was where to find resources, even if you don't know the answer, right? Where to find resources and just how to channel that inner entrepreneur spirit, right? So even if not everything I learned in barber school was directly applied to the barbershop industry, just knowing that, okay, there's some certain principles of business like keeping the right people around you, having a good network, keeping your expenses low. Just the fundamentals. Really, it wasn't anything
Yeah.
super crazy.
Yeah, no big secrets and no great big
No,
sort of
no.
things. Oh yeah, this is what you got to do. But that's like you say, most of business is common sense. It's just enabling yourself to sort of be in that zone to understand what common sense is and take away the sexy business stuff, as I call it, that you see so much of. And let's get down to the bread and butter of it, and then you'll be okay. That's the main thing there. So how long have you had the shop now, Henry?
So we just had our 6 year anniversary. Um, and 4 of those years, I've been an absentee owner because I've moved around a little bit. So I pretty much just have a manager in place who
Okay.
kind of manages the day to day. And then, of course, I take care of the expenses and the bills and, keep the lights on. And, the manager just pretty much makes sure, the barbers are, staying on point and
Yeah.
taking care of what needs to be taken care of. Shop is clean, shop isn't burning to the ground, clients are being taken care of, and that kind of stuff.
Was that an idea that you had from the start? Was to get out, sort of, and become sort of like you say an absentee owner, or was that something that just sort of came along by happen circumstance?
So it happened by circumstance because my wife, well, she was a girlfriend at the time, but she was going to school in Washington, D.C., right? So I ended up having to move to Washington, D.C. after about 2.5 years of owning the shop. And it was just kind of just like I said, out of circumstances, because even after living in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, I had to move again to Dallas, Texas, which is where I'm at currently. So yeah, just circumstances.
How do you find that being sort of an absentee owner? Because I know sort of personally, I found it very difficult, sort of work, sort of having the business and then not being there on top of it. I mean, obviously, I think it depends on the team you've got in a little bit as well. Um, but yeah, how do you find that? Was that a big challenge at first to make sure everything was going to run the way you wanted it to run?
So yeah, it wasn't easy at all. But I think that the biggest thing is I just had to admit to myself that the barbershop isn't going to run the same as when I was there. And I think once I was able to come to terms with that, everything else just kind of took care of itself. Obviously, it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been all glitter and all free flowing. But I think it's just all about having a system and having a structure in place.
Yeah.
So over time, we've had some hiccups along the way, but right now it's pretty stable. And luckily, my own blood brother actually decided to become a barber, and he works in
Okay.
there. So that also gives me that extra stroke of confidence I need to
Yeah.
know that, okay, at least there's people in there that I trust to watch over the business.
Yeah. You've got a set of eyes on in there that are, they're not going to tell you lies, and they're going to make it tell you exactly what's going on. So that's good to have. So when you moved to Washington, did you carry on barbering there, or and sort of obviously now in Dallas as well?
Yes, so every city I moved to, of course, I cut hair. I
Yeah.
cut hair in DC for 2 years. It went pretty well. I was in a suite, of course.
Yeah.
And then after 2 years, again, had to move to Dallas, Texas. Started all over again. Went straight to a suite. And yeah, and I've been here for about a year and a half now.
How did you find growing your clientele from obviously when you're moving? Because I've done it myself, is moving different countries here and everywhere. How did you find growing your clientele? Like you say, you go to Washington, you're there for a little while, you grow a little clientele, you move down to Dallas, other end of the country. You're there starting again.
So yeah, I mean, Ben, with social media technology and all these booking apps, like Booksy is what I use.
Okay.
These days you don't really need to work in a barbershop or a salon. You could just pretty much just, as long as you have like your foundation of like having your brand and your social media and being a content creator and stuff like that, you can build your clientele in any city in America, maybe
Yeah.
even in the world. So for me, that foundation was already built. I already had a decent social media following, and I already have um I think I already had like 1,000 reviews on Booksy at this point. And
Okay.
Booksy does this thing where they can transfer your account to a new city. You don't have to start
Ah,
over and create a new profile and all these things, right? All you have to do is change the address and your profile will start populating in that city that you're in. So
okay.
essentially, that's what I did. So all I had to do was just change my address to wherever I am in Dallas, Texas. And instantly I start showing to people looking for barbers and they start booking. And, obviously from there on, it just kind of snowballs with word of mouth and, even attending a few networking events and passing out business cards. So honestly, this is kind of something I wish I knew earlier, but yeah, you don't have to be restricted to a barbershop or a specific city or a specific state or even a specific country. As long as you start your career and build that foundation, you can honestly go anywhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of the great things with hairdressing and barbering is you can go everywhere. Hair is hair, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
You can work. It's simple as that. Now, the other thing that you do, and I know you do this, is you founded the weighted cape company, didn't you? Designed the weighted cape. So how did that idea come about?
So the weighted cape, oh wow, the weighted cape came about. Honestly, I made a conscious decision to come up with an idea, right? I always, being a barber, I always knew that I wanted to change something in the industry. I didn't know what it was, but for the better part of the 8 years that I've been a professional barber, I've kind of always just had it in the back of my head, in my subconscious, to build something to change the industry, right? Now, as somebody who was, had a slight obsession with capes. I mean, I have like 25 capes,
Yeah.
like different textures, different fabric, different color, different logo, buttons, hooks. I mean, you name it, right? So being a cape enthusiast, I just started thinking of ways that maybe I could change what the primary function of a cape was. So around that time that I was brainstorming, I bought my wife a weighted blanket, right?
Yeah.
And after using the weighted blanket and loving it, I decided, I think this would be a pretty good concept, or it'll be pretty cool to integrate the concept of a weighted blanket with a barber cape. After doing some research, I was extremely baffled to see that it didn't exist.
Okay.
And that's when I decided to create it.
Yeah. It's a brilliant idea. Like you say, it's sometimes surprising the things that you think of and you think, oh, someone must have done it. And then you get there and nobody has done it. So at what point then sort of did you sort of find it's taken off quite well there with the weighted cape? Do you, obviously with the neurodiverse clientele and sort of the neurodiversity sort of thing that's going on at the moment, people becoming far more aware of it and clients' needs. Have you found that it's worked really well on that side of things?
Yeah, so after launching it, I pretty much realized that this was nice to have for everybody, but it was a need for a certain type of individuals. Honestly, life changing for certain type of individuals. So that just kind of inspired me to just go down the rabbit hole of learning more about neurodiversity and autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorders. I even got certified by a company called Sensory Safe Solution that pretty much gives sensitivity trainings to barbers and stylists. And that's pretty much how I started just becoming more informed about the need for more accommodations and inclusivity to neurodiverse people.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic idea. Where can people get the capes from?
So you can get the capes on www.theweighted.cape.com. We're also on TikTok, The Weighted Cape, Instagram, The Weighted Cape, Facebook, The Weighted Cape, YouTube, The Weighted Cape.
Yeah.
So anything The Weighted Cape. And we're also on Salon Centric. So if you go on Salon Centric, you can also find us.
Okay, perfect. What I'll do is I'll put all the links to that in the section below, and so people can find out where to pick them up, where to find out a little bit more about it. But it's been wonderful talking to you, Henry. Thank you very much for coming on, sir. No doubt we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Have a good
All
one.
right. Bye.
Bye bye.